Have you ever heard a number that just makes you do a double take? Like a number so big, so out there, that you can't help but stop and think about what it really means.
Yeah, like winning lottery numbers or the number of stars in the
Good.
galaxy.
How about this? Almost 26,000 people losing their jobs all at once.
Wow, that's a lot of people. What happened? A factory shut down.
Not even close. We're talking about teachers and staff in West Bengal. They were all appointed, got their jobs, and then boom, Supreme Court steps in and says, nope, the entire process was flawed, basically illegal. You're all out.
Seriously. All because of some paperwork error. That seems harsh.
Oh, it's way bigger than just paperwork. This whole thing is tied to what's known as the Bengal SSC recruitment scandal. Think of it like this. The court looked at the whole system used to hire these 25,753 people, the State Selection Commission, the SSC, and they basically said it was rotten to the core.
So, like a bad apple spoiling the whole bunch.
Exactly. It wasn't just a few bad hires. The court said the entire process was vitiated and tainted, meaning the way they were picking people for these teaching jobs was so messed up that they had to throw the whole thing out.
So this wasn't about budget cuts or anything. It was purely about the way these jobs were handed out.
That's right. And this wasn't a snap judgment either. The Supreme Court was actually upholding a ruling that came from the Calcutta High Court back in April.
So this had been brewing for a while then.
Absolutely. And to give you an idea of how bad it was, there are allegations that people got these government teaching positions without even taking the exams.
Wait, they just walked into a school and said, I'm the new teacher.
Not quite, but you get the idea. The allegations were that the process was rigged, no fair competition, no level playing field, and that's exactly what the court slammed them for.
So what happens to all those teachers now? Do they have to pay back their salaries?
That's where things get really interesting. The court said, no, they don't have to give the money back.
Really? Even though they got the job illegally? Seems like someone should be held accountable, you know?
Absolutely. It really raises some tough questions about fairness, accountability, and the financial implications of all this. But now the government has a huge problem on their hands. They've been given a tight 3-month deadline to hire all these teachers again, but this time do it the right way.
3 months? That's a pretty tight turnaround considering they have to find thousands of qualified people. Especially after this whole mess, they're under a microscope.
It's a big test, that's for sure. However, there was one group that Supreme Court actually made an exception for.
Oh yeah, what was that about?
Well, they ruled that any disabled employees who were hired through this flawed process would be allowed to keep their jobs.
A little bit of compassion in the midst of a pretty hard-nosed ruling.
I guess you could say that.
Yeah.
But even with that exception, this story is far from over. The Supreme Court has another hearing coming up on April 4th.
What's that about? More appeal?
Not exactly. They're going to decide whether the whole investigation should be handed over to the CBI, the Central Bureau of Investigation.
Whoa, bringing in the feds. That's a pretty big deal. Sounds like they want to dig a little deeper into who was responsible for all this.
I think that's a safe bet. So, for anyone listening who's trying to understand this, the big takeaway is that the integrity of public institutions really matters. When systems break down like this, it erodes trust. And the consequences, well, we're seeing them firsthand. Thousands of people out of work, a massive scramble to fix things, and a cloud of suspicion hanging over the entire process. What happens in the next 3 months with that new recruitment drive, it's going to be very telling. Will things really change, or will it be more of the same? And the fact that the Supreme Court might bring in the CBI, it shows how seriously they're taking this whole thing.
And it really makes you think about how such a huge failure could happen in the first place. What systems need to be in place to prevent this kind of thing from happening again? And what's the role of the judiciary in holding people accountable?
Exactly. This whole situation has a lot more chapters yet to be written. What we've seen so far might just be the tip of the iceberg.
It makes you wonder how this whole thing's going to play out in the long run.
Yeah.
Will people trust the system again? Will real change happen? That's something to keep in mind as this story continues to unfold.
Well said. Lots to think about for sure. Thanks for breaking it all down with me.
Absolutely. Always happy to dive into these complex issues.
And for all of you listening out there, stay informed, stay engaged, and keep those critical thinking caps on.
We'll catch you next time for another deep dive.